Joe Amaral of the Christian Research Group joins us to reveal the story in the stars. Joe, welcome to Real Life.
Thank you guys so much for having me today. It's great, man.
Absolutely, this is wonderful. Well, before we get into this story in the skies, I have to ask you, how did you find Jesus, or how did he find you?
It started back in 1987. I grew up in a nominal, Catholic home. They called us CEO, Christians, Christmas and Easter only, and just never really knew a lot about God growing up. I knew about him, but didn't know anything about a relationship. And growing up in the streets of Toronto, in an immigrant neighborhood, my parents came from Portugal, and so there's a lot of poverty and a lot of things that come in with that environment. Got into, a lot of things, and one of those things was like heavy rock music, And my mom started going to church and started taking me to church, and let's just say the music available to me in church wasn't matching what I grew up with until I found out about this band in the 80s called Striper. And they were heavy, and they had the tight clothes and the long hair and all that stuff, and I'm like, they look the part, and they were awesome, great music. And we're going to give away our age here. I went out and I bought a vinyl record. You guys remember those, right? And I pulled out the lyric sheet and was following along as they were singing, and I was like, this is what the guy in church was saying, but they're saying it in a way that relates to me. And I got on my knees at my bedside. There was a song called The Rock That Makes Me Roll. You can have his power in your soul. I want that, whatever that is. Wow. And I said the most simple prayer of all and said yes to Jesus, in my bedroom as a 17-year-old kid. And it's just been the most transformative decision I've ever made.
And God has done so much through your life right now. And you've written this book, The Story in the Stars, and it is fascinating. And we're going to go down some interesting roads here for a Christian TV show, which is to look at the stars. Is God speak? Does he speak through the stars? And what do we not mean? If you could just define that for us as well.
Well, let's start with what we don't mean. Because I know when I saw some images in that opening video of ours, and they see these zodiac signs, they'll see Aquarius and Virgo and go, whoa, what in the world is going on? And it's very important to address that. I used to say that the book in part is helping Christians to redeem the zodiac. But I thought that's actually not true. We're not redeeming it because they were never the devils in the first place. Mm-hmm. Right. He didn't create the stars. He didn't create the constellations. He didn't put the story in the stars. So it wasn't his in the first place. So we're not giving it back to him. Right. What we're doing is we're restoring the zodiac. We're restoring these signs back to their proper place. And God designed the heavens, the universe, the stars, and placed them to make these images in the sky to tell this amazing sequential story. And so for anybody watching, whether it's live or they're watching it later online, I want people to know, in Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 2, there's a very strong verse about astrology. And I just released a video on social media if people want to see it. It's a little harsh, but it's real. Where God says, anybody caught loving, serving, or consulting the sun, the moon, or the stars, God says, I won't bury you and I won't raise you up, but you'll be like dung lying on the ground. That's how drastic the comparison is. God says, if you go to any other source but me for your identity, that's dung, that's garbage, that's nonsense to me. So I don't want any person to come from this going, he talked about Aries. I'm an Aries. No, you're not an Aries. You're a daughter or a son of God. That's where you get your identity. And I want to make sure people get that before we go anywhere else today.
Amen. It's so important that we make that clear, that we're not talking about astrology, but we are talking about that God has placed things in the heavens that give us insight.
It made me, like, just reading the book, which is a great read, believe in my Creator. So talk to us about, just the work of this book.
It was not something I was planning to do, I got to be honest with you. I had a ministry in Israel. Things were going really well. I traveled for well over 15 years into churches preaching and teaching, and I was really happy to do what I was doing. And I had this dream that just came out of left field. Do you ever have those experiences where you think you're going one way and then God says, I got something new for you? I just spent 15 years telling the church that Jesus wasn't a Christian, okay? That he was a Jewish rabbi, and they were finally getting okay with that. And now God said, oh, by the way, I'm the one who put the zodiac in the sky. I'm the one who put these pictures there to tell you a story. And so I began to look into these images. I woke up from a dream and I really felt God say to me, check the constellations. That's where you're going to understand what you were seeing in the sky. Because in my dream, I saw a woman and I saw a dragon, and I thought, what in the world did I eat before I went to bed last night? Like that. Women and dragon. And check the constellations. No, Lord, I can't check those signs. Those are like not from you. Check the constellations. And I remember thinking, I know that voice. That voice has spoken to me before. Yeah. That voice said, say yes to me. That voice said, marry that woman, go to that Bible college, do this ministry. So I knew that it was God. And so I began to check what the different signs of the constellations were. And there was only one female. There was a woman. And it was this constellation called Virgo. And then I kept looking. I said, in the Bible, is there anything about a woman and a dragon? Revelation chapter 12. It's there.
We have it up on the screen right now. Yeah.
That's the verse there from Revelation chapter 12, verse 4, that totally blew my mind. What I'd been seeing in the dream was actually in the Bible. You know, and John says there's a woman, she's clothed with the sun, and she has the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars. And I'm like, what's John seeing? Is it symbolic in nature? You know, people have said the woman of Revelation could be the church. It could be Israel. It could be prophecy. It could be the Holy Spirit. It could be all these things. But what if it's more practical than that? What if John is looking up at the sky and he's actually seeing a sign in the sky? And so I looked it up. What sign is a woman? Virgo. And I said, okay, I wonder when Virgo would be viewable in the sky from the Isle of Patmos 2,000 years ago. Well, Virgo is there. And then he says that she was dressed in the sun, clothed in the sun. What does that mean? That means the constellation is passing through the sun in the sky. That only happens at a certain part of the year. And then he says the moon was under her feet. That only happens at a certain part of the year. And all of a sudden, we're getting coordinates from John. It's not some random spiritual vision he's having, but he's actually seeing a sign made up of stars. And if we begin to follow the signs, we get to an incredible discovery about who Jesus is. And I tell people that God uses images because they're the best way to get a message across without saying a single word. Yeah. You know, we have the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's right. Well, God put 48 pictures in the sky. And as you study them, they unfold like a book. You have the main sign, which is the chapter, and then you have all these sub-signs, which are like little chapter headings. And they coordinate with the life, with the birth, the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. And I thought, wow, God, there's no way this is a mistake. You love us so much that no matter where we live in space and time, whether you're in Pittsburgh, you're in Toronto, you're in Israel, you're in Africa, no matter where you are, if you can look up at the sky and you can see those images, think of a comic book, think of a graphic novel, a few simple pictures, and a story begins to unfold.
And these are images that have been seen in the sky since the dawn of recorded history.
That's right.
And it's not just one culture. There's cultures, and they're very consistent across cultures.
100% consistent.
Talk about that a little bit. You said 48. Most people say, well, there's 12 signs.
Yeah, there's 12 signs, and under each sign, there's something called a decan. You have these 3 sub-signs, and the 3 sub-signs speak to what the main sign is saying. So there's 48 in total. And whether it's the Chinese, the Mesopotamians, the Syrians, the Hebrews, the Africans, you go back in time and look at their star charts. They go back as much as 5,000 years. They all have the exact same 48 constellations. I mean, if we look at the lights right now on the ceiling, and I said, do you see any images? You might say, yeah, that one kind of looks like a dog, or that one kind of looks like this. But if we had never talked to each other, and then we come back after an hour, and we find out that we all saw the exact same signs made up of the exact same lights, you would say, there's no way that's random. And I believe God is the one who gives us the meaning of what the signs actually are. And so even though a constellation like Virgo in English is that word, and in another language it's another word, but they always mean virgin, no matter what group you go to. And she's always holding a branch in her hand. And the branch in the Bible is a symbol of God. Yeah. It says that he is the root, he is the branch, the beautiful one. And you see that one day a virgin is going to bear forth God. And you're like, are you kidding me? That's the first constellation. There's 47 more to go.
Wow.
But we're out of time.
It's the Bible. This is amazing. It makes me be in awe of God. I don't know if you've ever doubted, like, is this all real? You know, God has been speaking throughout the ages to every generation through the sky. This is an awesome story.
It's incredible, and we're going to have more time with Joe in a little bit, talking about some more. And again, this is different than what you may have heard before, but it's amazing how God puts these things in our place to talk about. And Joe, I'm going to ask you this question now. Why? Why does God do that? I mean, we've got the Word of God, we've got the Bible, we're preaching the Bible, we're not preaching a salvation message through the stars, but why does God do that?
Because He loves us on purpose. Because He loves us with purpose. Because He didn't want a single person anywhere in space and time or history to ever miss the message. Think about it. I've had the chance to be on lots of archaeological digs in Israel, and we go into an old cave or something. Very seldom do we find writing, but we always find pictures. Because it doesn't matter if I speak that native language or not. If I can see, I can understand the story. And because God loves humanity and didn't want anybody anywhere in history to miss it, He puts a story in the stars. So as we look up from Virgo, who's the one who gives birth to God, all the way back down to Leo, the lion, from the tribe of Judah, who comes as the conqueror at the end of time. The whole story of God is in the scriptures, and He does this because He cares about us so much that He doesn't want anyone to ever miss His story in the stars.
That is so good. That is so good. Joe Amaral is back with us talking about the story in the stars. God's written a story. And Amy had just shared Psalm 19.
Yeah.
And can you just share a little bit about that? Because it is so clear that God is speaking to us through the things around us.
Yeah, well, I nearly fell off my chair when you started talking about that in your teaching segment. I said, Psalm 19, it's such an important Bible verse when it comes to understanding astronomy over astrology, about understanding God's creation and why create in the first place? He's God, He's omnipotent, He's omniscient, He doesn't need us. Why go to all the effort to make a creation? And so as we read Psalm 19, everybody gets stuck in that first part of the verse, okay? You know, the heavens declare the glory of God. And I bet you people watching at home right now, they have, pictures on their wall frame with that verse, or they have necklaces. It's a beautiful verse. People think about just a gorgeous cloudless night where the moon is full and there's stars everywhere, or a beautiful sunset, and it's all very pretty. But there's so much more to that verse. We forget what it says right after. It says that the heavens not only declare, they proclaim, they pour forth speech, they reveal knowledge night after night, but they don't use a single word. And I'm going, hang on a second. How can you reveal knowledge? How can you preach? How can you declare without opening your mouth? Again, we go back to pictures. Without saying a single word. We look back at our daughter's wedding picture from a couple of years ago. It doesn't have to say a word. It just, oh, my baby girl, it speaks to me. And God is so good. She gave him a Portuguese husband. We didn't pray for that, but God is just so good. And so, but it says the heavens declare the glory of God. So glory of God is at the center of the verse. And then everything else, it proclaims, declares, but it's all about the glory of God. So whatever the glory of God is, it's so important. The entire universe exists to declare it. So we've got to figure out what the glory of God is. And we've missed that because we get lost in the beauty of the passage in creation. But what is the glory of God, and why is all of heaven pointing towards it? When we get to Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3, it says the Son, S-O-N, not S-U-N. The Son of God is God's glory and His exact radiance. So that means that the heavens are declaring Jesus. And every night they're revealing knowledge. They're giving us information night after night about Jesus. And when I got a hold of that all creation exists to point us towards Christ, to point us towards the Son of God, that changed the way I saw that verse and the way I saw creation. And so I want people to understand that these images are there to point us not to ourselves. We don't go to horoscopes and zodiacs and say, oh, what does it say about me today? It says nothing about you today. That's nonsense. If you want to know who you are and what you are, and if you want to know what the creator of the universe has to say about you, then you turn to His word.
In your chapter, Jesus was a Virgo. Did I say that right, Virgo?
Yeah, that's a popular chapter.
You said night after night, day after day, year after year, and millennia after millennia, the heavens have been pointing us to Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. It's all about, like you said, giving glory to Him. Everything exudes and lives and breathes and moves to give Jesus glory, to give God all the glory.
So think about that. If the enemy knows that the creation exists to declare Jesus as being the Son of God, what's his line of defense? Distort, twist, deceive, lie, change the focus of humanity so that when they look at these images, they're not going to look higher to Jesus. So he turns it back on ourselves. You know, again, the enemy, he can't redeem these because they were never his in the first place. Since the garden, he's been lying to humanity, twisting the truth just enough to derail us, to help us to miss the mark. And so what we're calling people to do with Story in the Stars is to put all that aside, is to reclaim the original intent of these signs, to point us towards Christ. And as we do that, I think we're going to see him in a totally new way.
Well, what is the most famous star in the Bible is the Star of Bethlehem. And you go on to a whole explanation. I don't know if we can cover that all here, but as best you can, what is the Star of Bethlehem?
Well, I'll give you the really, really fast version. You know, some people said, well, God created a new star for the birth of Christ. Could God create a new star? Absolutely. But we don't see that's how God works. God usually uses nature, and he puts his super on it. That's how you get supernature or supernatural. When he delivered the Israelites, you know, he used wind, he used water, he used fire. He uses what's in place. Some people thought maybe it was a comet, but we have nothing on record of a comet coming through our solar system at that time. What we see is God using nature. There's a star. We call it a star, but it's actually a planet, Jupiter. And in those days, they couldn't tell the difference between fixed stars and moving stars like planets. So to them, planets, stars that moved, they were called the kings of the sky, because these ones were there for all time, but these ones had the power to move. And there was one that was larger than them all, which was Jupiter. So Jupiter wasn't just the king, but in antiquity, Jupiter was called the king of kings, or the king of all the kings, which is actually pretty cool. And Jupiter does something called retrograde. And it's an astronomical term that we don't use a lot, but if you understand what God caused to happen, it'll blow your mind. Retrograde is when a planet is moving in one direction. Now remember, they're moving, we're moving. You ever pull into a parking lot, and the second you put your car in park, a car starts to move, and you kind of get that freaked out feeling? That's retrograde. The apparent movement of another object based on your position. So Jupiter seems to be going in the sky, and then it starts to slow down, and it goes reverse, and then it goes on its course. And then 5 months later, it did it again. It came back, went slow, and then it did it a third time. From our perspective, it looks like it's doing a circle in the sky, or it's creating a crown or a halo effect. Now the wise men, these magi in the Far East, are watching the star going, something crazy is happening here. Jupiter, the king planet, is creating a crown over retrograde over one star and one star only in the entire sky. And it's a star called Regulus. And Regulus means the little king. And the star Regulus is in the constellation of Leo, which is the constellation of the king. And this happens on the first day of a Hebrew month called Tishri, which is the Feast of Trumpets. And on Feast of Trumpets, that's the day they would blow the shofar to announce the birth or the induction of a new king. So think about it. The night that Jesus, the King of Kings, is born, the king planet performs a halo or a crown around the little king in the constellation of the king on the night where kings are inducted. That's how God announces the birth of his son.
Mind blown.
God blows our mind.
And to think that I think in your book you said there's trillions of galaxies.
Oh yeah, trillions, 3.5 trillion galaxies.
So to think about the God of the universe so intricately involved in all of this detail, and that's just a little picture of the stars. That's not even our ecosystems, but yet he created us. We are his greatest treasure and so God is intricately involved in all of the details of our lives. He's planning things out for you. The plans that he has for you, they are limitless. The sky is the limit. He wants to do so much in your life. We would love for you to give us a call at 888-665-4483. We want to pray with you. We want you to know how God is passionate about you and all of the details of your life. Thank you, thank you, thank you.